Hello to the Missing Witches Coven. It's your Auntie Amy. I want to welcome you to Mabon, to Autumn, and to Season 4 of the Missing Witches podcast.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
So happy Mabon, lovelies, on this dark moment where we actually get to meet and find each other finally in sort of person and digital person.
Happy equinox. It's that point where light and dark are in equal balance, and we always love these days because it makes me feel a little more imbalanced in my own head in crazy times when I know that the earth is in a balance of dark and light.
Yeah, I always feel a little bit electric at like maybe a week before the equinox, like when the tides change, like from between the seasons. I always feel a little bit like zzz, like
yes,
in my body.
Electricity. So Sandra is here with us. Risa and I are chatting with Sandra. Sandra, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
All right. I'll try my best. I'm Sandra. Wow, what do I say? I have a cat named Lenore. I live in Montreal. I'm doing a PhD at Concordia University, where I look at witchcraft. And I look at specifically the tools that witches use, and also the techniques, so the tools and techniques of witches, and how that sort of pertains, how that relates to knowledge making and also knowledge unmaking. And I teach as well. So I teach in anthropology, I've taught in religion, in English, and yeah. And I get up to some witchery as well every day.
I love that we're talking about being at this like midpoint and middle point, and your work is so much for me at this incredible meeting point. Like your work is art and it's academia and like research, and then it's also sort of crafting with the world. Like for our listeners who maybe think about what they could bring to academia, you know, even though they may be from strange witchy bents and backgrounds. Do you have advice about how, or stories from your life about how that sort of in-betweenness managed to work its way out for you? You're a doctor, you're a professor of witches.
Crazy. Well, professor is amazing. writing my thesis. It's kind of crazy. It's like a field where like nobody's really in this field, or if they are, they're like, you know, a 60-year-old anthropologist who is looking at sort of witchcraft as something that may have happened once, or that some people do. But there's not a lot of people who are sort of within witchcraft and looking at it from the inside as a living and breathing phenomenon. And so I'm interested in that. I'm not sure how I was drawn here. I'm sort of just like, I think I've always been sort of a nerdy witch. So connecting these crafts sort of came naturally to me. And I never actually thought that I would do that. I never really thought these two worlds would meet. And then just as I sort of continued, on my academic path, it felt inauthentic not to combine witchcraft in sort of knowledge making, because it's such an important form of knowledge, as you know, that has been really left out of institutional knowledge. And I think that on some level, this is a good thing. I don't think that witches really want to be institutionalized. I don't think that witches are dying to get into the academy. But on another level, I think that this is something that could be looked at a little bit closer. So how can the knowledges of witches be worked into sort of philosophy or and how can the techniques of witches, like such as, you know, spell crafting, even just like the act of making knots to cast a spell, like what does that say about knowledge and knowledge making? What does that say about, yeah, like you were saying about craft in the world? Also, I have almost all of my personal planets in my 6th house, which is really like the house of work, the house of craft. So for me, I think those things sort of just like alchemically sort of poured out at me at a certain time in my life. And I just kind of stopped wanting to contain things separately, and I'm just trying to combine as best I can and see what happens at the end of it.
And that's one of the things that's so beautiful about equinox to me, is that, yes, it's this balance of light and dark, but it's not like turning on a light switch or turning off a light switch. It's very much a dimmer, you know? And so that's what you're doing, is like blending this one aspect into another.
Totally, yeah. So you're like blending and also trying to like retrieve, and also trying to, I think there's, well, as we all know, and as you also write about in your book, there's so much, you know, these knowledge-making systems that came out of the Enlightenment and that are geared towards the rational have done so much harm to people, you know, people who are witches or who were called witches, accused of being witches. And so there's like a lot of healing work to be done with that, I think. And there's sort of so much power in that, right? And sort of bringing these knowledges of our ancestors, pre-colonial knowledges, back into the fray, like back into sort of the light of day, without, like, it's also a tricky dance, I have to say. It's sort of a delicate dance because we don't want to give away all our secrets to the enemies. But yeah, but like you said, yeah, exactly. Like we want to create sort of like a dimmer effect, maybe, like, which is also like a way of balancing the light and the darkness, and sort of seeing what can be created out of that wasn't there before. So something new that comes to light, and also recognizing that rational knowledge is not the be all end all. That there are so many other ways of knowing and unknowing in the world that are so much more interesting and so much more in balance with the world itself and the people in it.
I was just thinking it's so validating to hear you say that, Sandra, and as our listeners may have picked up on, Sandra is like one of 3 people in the world who has read our book, which is now available for pre-order. But we were sort of terrified releasing it to people after these sort of months of working on these ideas quietly up in the woods, you know, on our own. Mm-hmm. I wonder how you feel when you have to present these ideas, or you get to students. How do they react when you give them this sort of glimpse?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I think like people react in such different ways. But what I have noticed is that, you know, the students that do react positively and do take to it are so hungry for this. They're so ready for it. Like, especially the students who, you know, come from different backgrounds or are queer, or, you know, when they hear someone stand in front of a room and talk about witchcraft and give them readings, like, as you know, because I shared one of my syllabi with you, that I put like your podcast on my syllabus, and people just eat it up, really. Like, the students love it. I think that there's such a real want for this kind of knowledge in our world right now, because our world is hurting. Like, look all around us, like the pandemic, the wildfires. You know, Mother Earth is crying out. She's pissed off. And I think people feel that. And I think also, since my students, you know, they're like 19, 20, I think they've grown up a lot with that. And so a lot of them are really hungry for these knowledges coming back into play, and that they can really engage with, you know, in academia, not just like, especially in the course on anthropology. Like, anthropology is full of like these old white men who have, you know, traveled into places they view as exotic and excavated the knowledge, and completely appropriated and misrepresented the people who live inside that knowledge. So I think, especially in that context, it was so important to do that. And of course, there are the students that aren't there for it. Of course there are. But I'm just not speaking to those students. I'm speaking to the students who you know, who like want something different, who want, like, they want the knowledge of our grandmothers. And that's such a beautiful source of knowledge to get to interact with in academia.
And that actually sort of brings back around to something that I wanted to say earlier, which is that you talked about intuition and the over rationality that we've come to laud as the only way. And I think that that's a part of misogyny too. So we talk about women's intuition. We talk about, like you were saying, grandmothers' old wives' tales. And all of this language has like kind of a dismissive nature to it. So I really, once again, like I find that when you go into the ivory towers of the academy, it's a way of legitimizing things beyond a quote unquote old wives' tale.
Absolutely, yes. And I think like there's a scholar or a philosopher, quite a famous philosopher named Isabelle Stengers, who's a French philosopher, and she writes about witches and has been doing so since the 90s. And this is exactly what she talks about, exactly what you said. So these, the type of knowledge that witches make will be called like superstitious or old wives' tales. It's really like misogynist, harmful language. And she talks about how it's so important for us, like especially as scholars. And she uses a line from Starhawk. It's so important for us to smell the smoke in our nostrils, of the burned and the burning witches of history, and really to feel that like as a phenomenal presence, and to realize the harm that's been done through sort of philosophical knowledge to these other forms of knowledge making, where scholars like academics would have sided with the witch hunters, would have sided with the people burning witches. So to actually go onto that team as a witch and as someone who speaks about witchcraft is incredibly powerful. And sort of we can try to reclaim these knowledges in a way for the academy, but also just for ourselves, and to see what new things can happen. But yeah, there's also, I also have a problem with, these monikers like wives' tales or the grandmothers as something that's less powerful. Like, I think it's hugely powerful. I love the phrase wives' tales. There's something hugely powerful in that, like the tales of like, it sort of like reminds me of like spiders spinning webs or something. It's like those kinds of tales are the tales that I find fascinating and interesting and juicy, not the tales of like the white men in like wigs standing in a room, like, talking civilly to each other, but the tales that are embodied and that are lived and that are full of experience and full of like scents and sounds and songs. Like those are the kinds of tales that I love to see and that I love to sort of try to find more of and excavate.
It's funny that you use the word excavation. I was just working on an episode for the podcast about Margaret Murray.
Oh, excellent. Fun.
So fun. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's so fun. Oh yeah, she's so fascinating. I'm so into her. I'm so into this idea that like, we'll talk about someone who was so resoundingly, disdainfully discredited,
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you look at her alongside her like male peers writing about the same things and the respect with which their ideas were given. And it's really so blatant. And it's not just misogynist, it's classist and racist too, this stance towards other knowledge. So it's pretty important work that you're doing, and that I feel like we're a part of this movement of people being like, there's other kinds of information and knowledge out there in the animal world, in the natural world, and in other races and classes and marginalized genders and identities. And if we don't fight for a space for that in every arena, then we're not going to win. Whatever winning looks like, we're not going to survive and heal.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to survive. I think like that. I think it's that urgent. I think it's that urgent. We're not going to survive if we don't get in touch with these other forms of knowledge that have been evaded and erased. And it's ongoing, right? Like the persecution of witches, of course, is ongoing, just as the persecution of like academics that may not fit the mold, like in the case of Margaret Murray, is ongoing. So these things are, these things are playing out today. And Yeah, it's important. And that's what I also love about your guys' podcast, is that you really like tackle these issues in such like a beautiful multivalent way. Like you have so much like perspective on these issues, and you're not afraid to like go into some of the more controversial figures. Like, what was I listening to that? You did an episode on Madame Blavatsky, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, this is someone who's sort of been, she's like an incredibly controversial figure, and you sort of go there. Like, I love that. I love that you go into these places and research it and really try to figure out what these people were up to. It's so important and so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so kind of ironic about academia to me, is that it seems like so willfully incomplete, and for a space that's supposed to be like learning centered, I don't know how else to describe it other than willfully incomplete. Like Reese and I sort of started this project because we had to go looking, because the witches were missing.
Yes, and I love this. I love this idea of the search, like especially in Virgo season. I was thinking about searching the other day, and there's, you know, like when you think about like what Virgo is and what the fall is, it's like Demeter is searching for Persephone, right? She goes into the underworld, she searches. Or if you look at the Hermit card, which is astrologically assigned to Virgo, it's also someone searching with this lantern. So I love that you have this focus on like that you're searching for something that you're not quite sure what you're going to find. And it's this curiosity that keeps you going. And I think that's what the knowledge game is about. It's about the search. Whereas so many scholars, like you were saying, or so many academics, my poor peers.
Risa and I did our time in the academy as well, so they're our peers now. We love you. We love you. We know you. You're our friends. We're talking about those other academics.
Those other academics, yeah. But it's like the academics who aren't searching, right? The academics who already know that what they want to find, and who already know the answer to all the boring questions they're going to ask. That's not exciting. The exciting thing about even, being in a university environment, like whether teaching or learning, is about the searching, and is about like really this curiosity of like going into the dark spaces, like going down the dark stairs with the lantern and seeing what's there. Especially as we're in this sort of like seam of time where we're going from the light into the darkness. And all the things that we don't know we'll find there, all the little shiny things that are waiting for us to find them. That's what sort of keeps me going and keeps me excited about, I don't know, about the world.
I always think of the Amanda Yates Garcia quote, and maybe I'm misquoting a little bit, but in our travels through the underworld, witches become map makers. Risa, I know that's one of your favorite quotes from Initiated too.
That's so beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a good spark or something for me, and maybe for our listeners, a ritual or a little practice or a challenge or something we can wrap ourselves around for this Mabon. We like to take inspiration from our guests. And Amy and I sometimes will just make one up with each other as we're talking. So here's the one that came to mind. And if you guys have other ones that come to mind for this Mabon for our listeners, then maybe we can share them. But mine is go for a sacred walk at night. Go for a walk where you don't know where you're going. Take a light if you like. Take a little flashlight or a candle and some matches, and when you find somewhere alone, you can light it. Or go and don't take a light and follow the light that's out there. There's stars and there's lanterns on hills, and just enjoy that sort of rhythm and gait that you find, and remember that you're just a body searching. You're just a wave. You're just a bunch of particles. You're just a little bit of light looking for other light, try to connect with that during this dark time, maybe.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I love that also,
Yeah.
like connected to map making and to what to the quote that by Amanda Garcia, where you could actually like involved in that ritual, you could actually say, get a map in front of you, like of Montreal, and close your eyes and put your finger on a spot and sort of decide that if you go there and search in that spot, you're going to find a treasure. So it could be like combining the night walk with like sort of hunting for some kind of treasure that you're not quite sure you will find. And then also kind of discovering something different. Or if you're in the country or wherever, I'm not sure where you guys are. You're outside of Montreal, but
no, but wherever you are out there,
wherever you are, yes, wherever you are, get a map.
Yeah, I mean, between what you're saying, Risa, and what you're saying, Sandra, I'm like having this vision of a new neighborhood or a dark place or just some kind of unknown being like a box that you dig up that was someone else's time capsule, or a kid who like put some toys in a box and buried it. But when you dig up the box and you don't know what's in it, it's almost more thrilling than when you open it and discover the contents. That's kind of the feeling that I'm having listening to you talk right now.
Totally. It's like, and decide that you're going to find a treasure. Like no matter where you go, you're going to find some sort of treasure there. Like whether that treasure is in the form of like a sound or a smell, or maybe like a box that you find or something.
A coffee shop you didn't know about.
Exactly.
Yeah. A sign that resonates with a memory you have that you needed to be reminded of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I like that you said a sound, Sandra. Like I like to take omen cues from like when cars drive by with loud music. I always to take it if I recognize the song. I always like to take it as an omen of some kind or another.
I love that. You know, I actually had that as one of my assignments for the anthropology students. I had them go around for a whole day and listen, like just listen to what's in their atmosphere, and then write an ethnography of like whatever sounds they were hearing. And the most interesting things were coming out of them. And then one student said that actually he didn't go anywhere. He just listened to the sound of silence in his own space, which was also kind of a beautiful ethnography of silence in a way. Like just these little treasures that we're surrounded by all the time that we might not see as significant, we might not see as full of beauty and wisdom.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I'll take that with me into this dark edge of this season. Sandra, do you have any, we just kind of did it, but if you have another one to share, I love ending these interview episodes or approaching the end with maybe a spell or a practice that you have, something that you find healing or inspiring. I believe some of your artistic practice is around automatic writing. So if you wanted to share something related to that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I really like these sort of threads we've been pulling out that relate sound to searching. And I think that automatic writing is such a simple practice of attuning that everyone can do. And that really helps you get in touch with because often when we're thinking of spell making, we're so focused on a product that we want. But sometimes what happens with that is that our will is not aligned with our actual feeling in our body, with our actual sensations, and therefore our spells are not going to work. So even something like, maybe I wouldn't suggest a spell, but like a pre-spell to like attune yourself, like just go into whatever space you're in. Get a little piece of paper, a pen, and just listen to what's happening and just let words come onto a page. One thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll sort of cover my floor with different pages. And each page has a question written on it, and then I'll turn that question over. And then while I'm doing automatic writing, I'm writing on all the different pages, and then at the end, when I turn it over, I can see what the question was and what the answer was on that page. And it helps me sort of like, that sound convoluted.
No, that was me gasping. I was like, Because I love writing the question. So you're writing down the question, and then you're flipping the page over, so maybe mix them up a bit, so you don't know what question you're answering.
Mix them up, yeah. And
I love that.
sit in the middle of them on just a cushion. So you're surrounded by your papers and whatever papers you want. Sit in the middle on a cushion, light a candle, light some incense, sort of attune with yourself. If you have spirits that you work with or guides, you can invite them to help you. Or you can just do it purely just by emptying your mind. And then just start the automatic writing and then go around. And as you really get embodied, get up, walk around, put your arms out like sensors, feel your atmosphere, and then just walk towards the pages and start writing or drawing whatever comes out of your body. And then at the end of it, you have this sort of collection of quote unquote answers that may have been different than what you would expect. And this will help you to align with your intentions and whatever else you want to do with that. Maybe you could turn that into a spell, or maybe that would help you better formulate what you want your spell to be like, or who knows, maybe it will just get some more interesting questions in your head. But that's a fun sort of simple exercise to do.
I love that, because it makes me think also of tarot cards, about how sometimes we just need to make an abstraction of our thought or our question and put it outside and into another framework in order to get a different kind of answer. I think abstraction is probably the best word that I'm looking for right now, just sort of taking everything out of context, mixing it around, and then looking at something in a different way. So yeah, that exercise really made me think of a tarot reading in a way.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And you could also do that for somebody else as well. You could get together with a friend and do that for each other as well.
Oh my God, you could trade questions.
Yes.
Party game, everybody.
Party game.
I'm definitely going to try this exercise. Risa, I would love to see what May, your daughter, might draw on the back of a question without knowing what the question is.
Oh my gosh, how fun. She mostly likes to draw bugs. Is that helpful?
Yes.
You'll have a little collection of insects by the end of it with answers to questions.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
She draws bugs and she slips notes under my door. So I have a pile of scraps of paper that she slipped under my door when I'm working, that are all profound and magical to me.
That is so sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you, Sandra, if you don't mind. And it's kind of a backwards question because, again, we make the podcast and then we sort of live in a vacuum after that. So I'm wondering, did your students have any questions about it that you kind of want to relay to us for a different kind of answer?
I think they didn't have questions too much. It's just they were engaging with the material. So, yeah, I think that they were sort of engaging with the stories that you were telling more than really asking questions specifically about it, because we were collocating them with readings, and then it would just add another layer of sort of embodied knowledge to what we were reading. There were a few students, I think I wrote you, who were such hardcore fans. They were I told them that you were coming into our class, and they were just they were actually, it's so sweet. They were planning on we were going to get little chairs, and then they'd bring some people were going to bring some food and some people some flowers and have a whole little thing for you guys, which I would still love to do for you in the future. But really, it was yeah, because you like you said, you're making this podcast and you may not know the effect that it has, but I know that, when I saw students interacting with it, and I myself, just from listening to you guys, it's such a gift that you are bringing into the world. Truly, it's such a beautiful homage to the ancestors of the witches. So I think there was more just a feeling of awe and like thankfulness, gratitude. But had you been there, I'm sure they would have that.
Yeah, for our listeners who might be a bit confused, we were set to go into Sandra's class and, you know, have a talk with her students, and then that was #ruined by COVID. But as we say, nothing is canceled, only postponed. Postponed.
Oh my God, it's such a different world. It's such a crazy world right now. And I think we're going back into it. Like, I'm just like terrified that we're going to be on lockdown again soon. But yes, let's not think of that.
Well, we can take our equinox this evening, to try and snatch some balance from the chaos of our environments.
Totally. And have you like developed any, I was wondering, have you developed any rituals that are specific to these times, like to pandemic times, like little things that you found that help you get through this time?
For me, I wonder if Amy, you would say something similar, but it's really important to keep my space beautiful and like to take the time to do tiny, small cleaning or dusting, like to take one plate on my desk and go over every single stone on it with my daughter and talk to her about every little trinket and why it's there and dust each piece. And I don't know, I find I need the meditation of small things right now. And then I also need the meditation of very large work. So I go back to, you know, writing or working on basic income or advocating for these really large scale webs of ideas of change, you know. So those are the sort of two perspectives for me. And I don't know, do you feel like you, Amy, have... I was at Amy's house this weekend and her house is pristine. So I feel like we're on the same page about that.
Yeah, I think I talked about this at Lamas too, how like my anxiety has, and I'm super grateful for this because up to this point in my life, my anxiety has sort of manifested in paralysis, especially when it comes to a sink full of dirty dishes. But now I've like turned this corner where like washing dishes is like a Zen activity for me. I just like, I'm like constantly cleaning my house, which again, I think is good. Like, because we have control over so little, you know, but our homes are our temples. And I feel like, especially when you're freaking trapped in them, that they should be as healthy of an environment as possible. But along those same lines, like macro and micro, Risa, I think you and I are doing the same thing where it's like large ideas and large, like, how can I change the world? But also I'm just like taking every moment that I can to focus on the breath, remind myself to breathe, and Sandra, to address what you're saying, the ritualizing of it is to remember that the breath is a communication between you and the earth and the atmosphere and the divine. You know, from a very scientific and practical way, you're putting out and taking in your very real particles, you know, which is especially important to consider at these times. But also on the metaphysical level of like, it's a conversation. It's a conversation between you and Gaia or God or, you know, whatever you choose to put your faith in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Sandra, I was going to say that Margaret Murray quote that Amy and I were talking about a lot, that goes as the title of that episode that'll be coming out soon, is ringing in my head, that the divine that science calls nature and religion calls God, that's in every breath. And for our listeners who are on the West Coast where breath is very painful, we're sending you our breath and sending you the love for the trees that are around you. And just be safe, guys.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so cool, but like all these, like the pandemic is about breath. The wildfires are about breath. Like there's something so vital about just remembering the importance of breath. Like you were saying, like it's such a very simple act, but it's so, like, especially right now with all these, you know, all these horrors that are going on, breath is so precious. Breath is such a treasure.
And it's also completely intuitive. You know, you didn't need to be taught how to do it. So for those people who think that intuition is nothing compared to formal education, I would suggest once again, focus on the breath.
I love that. I love that. Breath is like our ultimate, like the first form of knowing the world, which is being. Be alive.
Yes. So maybe this Mabon be a turning point, as it is for nature, but also for ourselves. We're all amazing, but we could all do a little better every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you for your time and your energy and your wisdom.
And your contribution to our book. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you so
beautiful
much.
writing in our book.
Wait to see this book. I cannot wait to hold this book in my hands. I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much for having me, and also just for being you and for doing this podcast. It's such an amazing resource.
Yeah, and we thank you, Sandra, and we thank our sponsor, Foxglove Farm, use offer code Missing Witches, and our patrons on Patreon. For real, like, you know, Risa and I think I bought like 4 books for one of my episodes this season. I'm like, thank goodness for our patrons and our sponsor who are justifying my book and research purchases.
Yeah, huge love to everyone who makes us feel that we're not alone in this strange quest in the dark.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We love you. Risa and I love you, listeners.
Love you. Me and my cat love you too. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
We love your cat.
Happy Mabon, everybody.
Happy Mabon. Happy Mabon.
You must be a witch.